Welcome to the Heritage Center and to the Oral History program, Mr. Narayanswami.
Thank you.
I know that you have had an extended association with IIT Madras in the 1960s, which was an important period for the institute in terms of its history. So, without any ado, do let us know how your association began and what it was like in that period.
Well, I think the first time I heard the word IIT was when my brother, who had finished his intermediate from Simla, and my father was posted in Gwalior at that time, he said there was this new institute called IIT Madras that was going to open up, and he was very keen to visit Madras, find out what it was. It was, I think, a year earlier that IIT Bombay had opened. And my father was quite happy that he was considering IIT Madras because being Tamilians, he said at least we have some relatives there and so on. And at that time, it was considered a totally unknown quantity. Nobody had heard of IIT Madras. The big college here was obviously College of Engineering, Guindy. Yes. So everybody thought Guindy was the place to go. But he came, he interviewed, and at that time, if I remember right, they had a quota system of various universities they wanted to, various states they want to recruit a certain number of people. So since my brother was an intermediate from Punjab University, and they had 2 seats or so for Punjab University, he didn't have to write an entrance exam. I always tell him he was lucky. He didn't have to write an entrance exam. So I remember coming here in 59 and 60, I remember they were in Saidapet and having classes in AC Tech and so on. But in 61, he moved to the campus, and so we all came here for a wedding. And I remember coming to IIT. My uncle got married in 1961 at Dasa Prakash, as a matter of fact. And at that time, I remember coming to IIT to visit where he was. And all I remember from that time was that Kaveri and Krishna were in the process of being built. Kaveri took in basically the graduates, the people who joined in 1959 and 60, and there were roughly 100 in each batch. They occupied Kaveri, and the new incoming batch, the 61 batch, who were the first group to write the entrance exam, were coming into Krishna. So those were the two. So at 60, when I came in 61, those two were fairly complete, and that's where all the students moved in. There was no Narmada, there was no Tapti. Then my father was transferred to Bangalore in 62. I remember coming here at that time.
Oh, was it from Shimla that he was transferred to Bangalore?
No, from Shimla we went to Gwalior and Gwalior to Allahabad, and then my father was getting transferred every 6 months. Right. So basically in 61 we got transferred to Bangalore. So at that time my brother was starting his 3rd year. Because 59, 60 was the 2nd year, and 61 he was starting his 3rd year. And then by that time IIT was quite well known, the entrance exam was quite well known and so on. So I remember thinking that one of these days maybe I'll take the exam. So that's how the journey started. Since the 61, I've definitely been coming to the campus. Right. And because from Bangalore, my father we had a car, we would drive over to Chennai and go to Tiruvannamalai and Pondicherry, and we would visit my brother here and so on. So that's the association that I remember. There were very few buildings at that time. What was then called the Civil Engineering Building and Building Sciences and Electrical Engineering and Mechanical Engineering, these were the ones that were being built. By the time I joined in 63, all our classes were being held in HSB. And that was a big building for us. Yes. So we would walk over from Tapti Hostel to HSB for most of our classes, because while we were divided into 4 batches, A, B, C, and D, there were 209 people that joined in my batch. Yes. So we had 4 batches of about 50 to 52 people each. A and B had classes 1 week, while C and D did workshop that week. Right. Then the next week, C and D had classes, while A and B did workshop. So for the entire first year, it was 1 week of classes, 1 week of workshop, 1 week
This was the famous sandwich system, as it was called, I believe.
I don't recollect it being called sandwich system or anything. All we remember is workshop week, and we had to wear khaki uniforms, and yes. And we also had NCC at that time because the India-Chinese war had occurred, and they were very keen that because of that, my brother's class graduated in early part of 64 as opposed to mid 64. By mid, I think towards the end of 64, the 65 batch had graduated. After that, it became more normal.
Yes. So your brother was Srini Nageshwar?
Srini Nageshwar from the 64 batch.
Right.
He did what was then called light current, electrical engineering light current, which dealt with transistors and so on, as opposed to heavy current, which dealt with transmission and power grids and things of that kind.
These would become electronics and power.
Yeah. It was basically called, it was called light current and heavy current. And in our era, it was called EELC or EEHC. So the guys who went into power transmission and electrical utility companies and so on went into heavy current. People like my brother who were more interested in transistors and so on, they went in. At that time, transistor was the big thing.
That's right. It had been newly invented.
Yes, that's right.
It was a source of entertainment.
And Sampath was possibly the principal man who, from the LC department that taught quite a few courses. He taught us also. We had to take in our time, we had to take an electrical engineering course in the third year and fourth year. Right. And the electronics part of it was taught to us by Professor Sampath.
I see. Right. So he was reputed to be a very good speaker, if I remember right.
He was very good, he was very patient, and I think more than anything else, he came across like an old uncle of yours. He was not intimidating, so from that point of view, I think people got along very well with him. Actually, one of my brother's classmates from the first batch, a guy called Malik Pucha, at that time his name was PMV Subramaniam. And when he went to the US, he had to come up with a first name, middle initial, and so on. So now he is called Malik Pucha. He collected money and I think has endowed a chair in the name of Professor Sampath in the electrical engineering department. Yeah. So he was an extremely popular man. And as I was mentioning to you before, his nephew was in our batch, a guy called Chari Srinivasan. So we all thought we had a little pipeline into Professor Sampath, thanks to his nephew.
Right. So IIT Madras was obviously a very desirable college to study in because when it hadn't even been established, your brother chose to study there rather than elsewhere. Yeah. So by the time you joined, what was the situation? It was even more popular, I imagine?
It was much more popular. I think the entrance exam was now well known to people, and I had a very unique problem in that my father, being in a central government service, we had studied all over. I went to 9 schools in 11 years. So we were not domiciled in any state, and my father said, I don't know if you're eligible to apply in Karnataka or Tamil Nadu, or even though I'm technically a Tamilian, I don't know what the status was in terms of whether I was domiciled here, whether I could get admission and so on. So I remember my father telling me, you better pass the entrance exam or you'll sit and do BSc Physics in the local college. So I was lucky to get through the exam. I did join in 1963. I was one of the younger members of the class because I came straight from 11 years of senior Cambridge. So I was actually when I joined, I was about 15 years and 10 months. I turned 16 only in August. So I was not yet 16 when I joined, because I think when the rules stated specifically that you had to be 16 by October 1st of 1963, but you couldn't be more than 18 by October 1st of 63. So that was the range we were in, and I have been very active in all our reunions, collecting data, collecting names. So I can, with some degree of confidence, I can say 80% of our class was 46 born, 10% of our class was 45 born, and 10% of our class was 47 born. That's the roughly spread. Right. And 209 of us joined the first year. So.
Could you tell us about the entrance exam itself? It's a very tough exam now, and there's a lot of coaching and a lot of time is devoted by students to preparation for it. So what was it like then, and what are your experiences?
Well, those of us particularly who had finished senior Cambridge, we had written our high school exam by December of 62. So we literally, and the exam was in the April-May time frame. So we had about 4 or 5 months to kind of prepare. But it was nowhere like the craziness that of coaching and so on. We did take some extra classes. For example, St. Joseph's College in Bangalore, I had offering some extra classes in physics and chemistry and mathematics. So even though I had not graduated from there, I went and attended a few. My father himself was a mathematician and physics person, so he helped me study. But I think we did it very casually. Most of the time we were just goofing off. We wrote the exam, and as I said, God alone knows how from what I understand, I think that year maybe, I don't know how many people would have wrote. Only 1,000 people were selected between Delhi, Kanpur, Kharagpur, Bombay and Madras. They took 1,000 people. I have a feeling 30,000-40,000 people may have taken the exam. Yes. And now, of course, lakhs of them, I think, take the exam. So whatever it was fairly competitive. Yes. And I think one of the first experiences I remember coming was, we were all fairly good in our own little school, But then we came here and found there were guys far brighter than us and far smarter than us, and it was quite intimidating. But it made us feel good when Professor Sengupta welcomed us, and I still remember one of the lines he told us. He said, you represent the elite of the school boys. So all of us picked up our collar a little bit and felt very proud that he was calling us the elite group. So that was flattering. But initially, we had to adjust to coming from small schools where we were 20, 30 people. Particularly, as I said, during the academic week, the two batches were combined for physics, chemistry, mathematics, and there were 100 people. One of the things I discovered is I never knew I had bad eyesight in school because I was always within 10 feet of the board. When there were 100 people and I was sitting in the 20th row, all I saw was a blank. So in panic, I remember calling my father and saying, I can't see a thing. So he actually came from Bangalore here, got my eyes tested. I discovered that I had to wear a minus 1.5, and all of a sudden I could see everything. But in school, I obviously must have had bad eyesight, but because my class in Bishop Cotton's was only 20 people. And here,
where were the classes held? Because you mentioned large
100% of our classes were for us in the 63 batch was in HSB. Yes. And I think what is now the Central Lecture Theatre or whatever, it used to be, I think the room numbers were called 131 and 132. That's where we had most of our classes. So we really didn't move anywhere during the academic week. We sat there, the physics professor, the chemistry professor, I remember a Koteswar Rao taught us mathematics. A gentleman named Ramji Rao taught us physics. There was a Professor Anantaraman who recently passed away. He taught us economics, which was the humanities code. Yeah, he taught us economics. And so these are the people I remember. I cannot for the life of me remember who taught us chemistry, but the physics and Koteswar Rao and Ramji Rao I remember very well. And Ramji Rao, I'll never forget, on November 23rd of 1963, we came to class at 7:30. Our classes at that time were 7:30 to 11:30 in the morning, which was 4 classes. We went back to the hostel, had lunch, took a little nap. Then 1 to 4, we used to do mainly drawing at that time. So the academic classes were in the morning and drafting and drawing was in the afternoon. Yes. So I still remember November 23rd, we walked in. Ramji Rao had done his PhD, I think, in the US somewhere. He came and said, I have some very sad news. And he said, yesterday, John F. Kennedy was shot. So I never forgot that day anyway, because by that time it was November 23rd. He was shot on 22nd, by which time it was late night here. Yeah. But I distinctly remember him telling us, and we all kind of sat there and said, oh my God.
The young president.
Young president, he was, at that time he was very well thought of and so on. Yes. So I remember Ramji Rao coming and telling us that. So.
You mentioned drawing classes. So were these classes also held in HSB?
No, the drawing rooms were above. It was in HSB, but we had 2 or 3 rooms with huge drafting boards. All of us had to bring what was then called set squares and a T-square. So we walked around with this big T-square and we were taught how to draw lines, and I didn't even know at that time that there were this many grades of pencils. You had HB, 2H, 3H based on the hardness scale, and then B was a softer scale. Yes. So a lot of times we would smile. There was a special drawing paper that you had to buy, and we would, of course, all of us being fairly young and naive, we would smile, especially if we used a softer pencil. The drawing would start looking very dirty because we would be smudging the lead all over the place. But we typically did 3 hours of drawing 5 days a week, because Saturday it was only half-day class. Yes. So 7:30 to 11:30 every day was academic classes, and afternoon was always drawing. And we started from the absolute fundamentals of drawing. By the time we reached the second year, we did more like 2.5 days of drawing and started doing more lab kind of work. But the machine shop thing continued for the first 2 years. We did first year it was all filing and carpentry and smithy. Second year it was more machine shop, where we learned how to operate lathes and milling machines and grinders and so on. So there's a lot of practical touch to what we had to do, and at least we knew what these machines were like and how to. It was like driving a car. You learned. It was very exciting. I enjoyed it immensely.
Yes.
Yeah, and at that time, a lot of the equipment was German equipment. Yes. They were German lathes, German milling machines. So I think IIT Madras, thanks to its association with Germany, had very top of the line machine shop equipment. And it was fun to work with those, precision and understanding what the vernier calipers were and so on. So we got in later years, the first job that I got after leaving IIT was as a senior management trainee with the DCM group. And because my father was based in Hyderabad, they said, you do all your training in Hyderabad. It was on-the-job training, and my first job was to be a superintendent of a machine shop with 150 people. So, that was, brought back memories, and I said, at least I can recognize the machines. Yes. I'm not going to look stupid because there were 3 foremen that reported to me, and these guys had come up through the ranks. They were possibly in their 40s, yes. And they knew, they had learnt everything from the ground up. So here I was, their superintendent, 22 years old. I'm trying to say, what the hell do I tell these guys? They know machining a lot better than I do, you know. Yes. So it was a little, but all our training did definitely help. I think I feel very proud of what I learned here and how it helped me to invest. And even when I went to the US and started working, my knowledge of machining was always very good, much better than most people.
That's right. So again, I would like to dwell on the German connection, yes. An ongoing connection that we have now with Germany. Can you recall the German professors who taught you during that period?
By the time we came, there were very few German professors who taught us, because as I was mentioning to you before, my brother was exposed, the first 2 batches were exposed to a lot more German professors. By the time we came, we joined, a lot of the staff had been recruited from Indian Institute of Science. Almost everybody here had an Indian Institute of Science pedigree. So we, other than one lady, there was a gentleman named Srinivasan, and he was married to a German lady named Ingrid. So Ingrid Srinivasan used to teach German here. So other than that exposure, we did not have as much exposure. We knew who they were in the machine shop and so on, and we knew who they were. But by the time my batch came, our interaction with German professors was minimal at best. But my brother and all were highly exposed to the, so if you talk to some of the guys from that era, they would give you a much better background on the German interaction. But we would see them in the campus. Of course, as I said, we used to admire the cars that they drove, because at that time there was only Fiat Ambassador and Standard Herald, and these gentlemen brought Volkswagens and Opel cars and so on. So it was fascinating to see these European cars. Yes. And as young boys, we were highly thrilled with these cars.
I'm told that there was one German professor who came driving all the way from Germany to India. Did you hear about that?
Yes, I did hear about it. I don't recollect who it was, but I did hear that he drove all the way through. If I'm not mistaken, it may have been a VW that he brought. I'm not 100% sure. But yes, I did hear that, and I think it is true. They were, one of the things we noticed about the Germans was, I was amazed, because we would see them in the open air theater for movies and so on. I think they were very down to earth. They never had an air about themselves. They were very friendly with the students and so on. And I think we really, from what I understand, I think IIT Bombay was set up with Russians. And how much the people interaction between the Russian faculty and Indians, I'm not 100% sure of that. But these guys were extremely people-oriented. You could talk to them, they would joke with you. I remember seeing that picture of a German singing Carnatic music. Yes. I remember he was learning Carnatic music here, and that's how much they immerse themselves in the culture here, as opposed to kind of living in a cocoon on their own and saying, those guys, let them do this, we'll do this. They were a very active part of day-to-day life in the campus, and that was very evident to us.
I dare say some of them learned the language as well.
I mean, they all knew smattering, and of course we were learning German. So there was definitely the camaraderie of they are learning our language, we learn their language, kind of a thing. Extremely, I think it was one of the best collaborations that we could have had was with the German government, because these guys were amazingly friendly, amazingly friendly.
What about the hostel that you stayed in? Can you tell us about it?
We were, when we joined, which was I think July 1st of 1963, we were all assigned Tapti Hostel, because that was the hostel designated for the incoming people. The previous batch was occupying Narmada Hostel, and we occupied Tapti Hostel. Of course, like in typical Chennai fashion, it was incomplete, there was no water, you couldn't use the bathrooms. And for me, since my brother was already established in Kaveri, I used to go to his hostel and have a bath and use the bathroom and so on. But the process of going there you would get ragged. Yeah, it was like walking through a, you would get ragged right off the bat, oh, he's a fresher and so on. Yeah, so ragging was one of the things. Every time you went for a bath. Ragging was very prevalent, and if I'm not mistaken, there were 3 or 4 gentlemen from our previous batch who were expelled for ragging, because I remember somebody complained, or somebody's father complained to Sengupta from my batch, and it was identified that, and some of the ragging, people used to use cigarette tips and burn skin and all that kind of stuff. It was brutal ragging, and I vaguely recollect there were 3 or 4 people who were expelled because of ragging. So, Sengupta was an extremely stern director. He would not put up with any kind of garbage, and he took prompt action. And as the years went by, it definitely declined. Now, I had been exposed to, because I went to Anglo-Indian schools and so on, missionary schools, there was always a certain amount of bullying. So even in Bishop Cotton's, when I went, I remember being bullied. And there was, I remember a Parsi guy named Nauzar Nauroji. He'd come and squeeze our necks. I met him 50 years later, and I was ready to really yell at him. He said, oh, those were the days, and he came and gave me a big hug, and he diffused the situation right away. So even having been exposed to that, I think the ragging here was pretty severe at that time. That was, I think, one of the negatives of IIT that I would say was not very pleasant. Right. And as I said, I was amongst the younger guys in class. I was barely 16 years old. I was not used to this, being treated like this, even though technically I had my brother to protect me. Yeah. There's only so much, there's only so much you can do.
That was a little reassuring for you.
Yes, at least I knew I had a release valve in terms of if I was having a problem, I could go seek solace. But, some of the guys would dread going out to any other place and so on. So I think if there is a minor black mark in our lives in IIT, I would say ragging was the black mark.
And the hostel itself, what sort of facilities did it have?
Well, it was when we came to the hostel, one thing, there were no fans in the hostel. So we had a nice little desk and a chair, and we had a steel cot, and obviously there was a window on the other side and a window on this side. So, and my first room was room 351 in Tapti, which was basically ground floor, first floor, second floor, third floor. The breeze was very nice, so it didn't bother us that much as far as not having a fan and so on. Later on, some of us managed to sneak in a fan. We were not allowed to bring a fan in those days. So some of us surreptitiously brought a fan in and kept it quietly hidden in one corner so that we could use it. There were nights, there were times when Madras was quite hot and the fan did help. But I would say less than 10% of the people possibly had fans. But the room by itself, I remember seeing the room about 10 years ago, and now there are fans in every room. But it was definitely not there, and only some of us had table fans. So that was there. And strangely enough, of all the jobs I got when I went to work for Shriram Refrigeration in DCM, one of my jobs was to make an Usha fan. I thought it was very ironic that I was making table fans after having been not allowed a table fan in the campus. It was also initially quite a little bit of adjustment for us food-wise. We had a majority of our classmates obviously were vegetarian, but we also had a non-vegetarian mess. The kitchens were very separate, and we got breakfast every day. We had to be in class by 7:30, so most of us got up around 6 a.m. and we would get particularly on the vegetarian mess, since I was a vegetarian, typically got upma, pongal, idli, vadai and all that during the morning. Weekends we used to get dosai. Then we would go to class, come back at 11:30. Lunch was a traditional lunch with chapati, rice, sambar, rasam and so on. There were 2 or 3 guys who for allergic reasons could not eat yogurt. So we would run to sit next to them so we could get their yogurt. And as a matter of fact, one of my classmates, T.R. Mohan, is here. We became good friends, and I used to sit next to him because he couldn't eat yogurt, and I always wanted the second yogurt. So there are a lot of these kinds of anecdotes that would happen. I had a very good friend named Masood Murtuza. He was from Hyderabad, and he used to eat in the vegetarian mess. After a lot of difficulty, I tracked him down, and we were just chatting. And I told him, I have to ask you this question. I said, how is it that you are the only Muslim who was a strict vegetarian? He said, no, I actually eat meat, but I found the meat dishes in IIT were terrible, so I used to be a vegetarian. I said that, I always thought you were a vegetarian Muslim, we were kind of joking about it. But I remember, we made some very good friendships. And I really do believe that living in a self-contained hostel with the mess and so on, I think we formed a bond that we would not have, just going to classes and coming back, I don't think we would have had the same bond. Second thing is we were in, there were 16 of us in each wing, and we used to hang out together and, come out on the balcony and kind of talk about things and get to know each other. Even today, I would say some of my best friends are people who were at IIT. I think our alumni I've kept in very close contact. We meet them. We have been coming every 5 years. I'm one of those people who has made sure I'm here for every reunion. And it's very, I think some of the friendships I formed are easily have been the cornerstone of my life.
These corridor conversations have been touched upon by other alumni as well, who have talked about how the conversations used to go on late into the night.
No, it was a very important part of our life, and the discussion would be everything from politics to exams to seeing films and so on. Because in our era there was no TV, there was nothing other than reading newspapers. Most of the time we had a lot of time to spend to each other. There was no computer, there was no iPads and so on. So for us, that hanging out in the corridors of our wing was the main activity. Yes. And plus a lot of us would have exams, and we would discuss hey, tomorrow's physics exam, what are you studying? We would exchange notes with each other. It was kind of like a team of 16 people all helping and aiding each other. There were some of the people that were, for example, in my own wing, there were a couple of guys from Bengal and a couple of guys from Mangalore and so on, who were not used to the typical Tamilian culture. So it was nice for them, we were kind of the guides as to, hey, you can do this, you can do that, and so on. Now, because my father had been in government service, I never really lived in Chennai.
You were very cosmopolitan.
I was very cosmopolitan. I'd lived in a lot. So I could relate to both the Hindi speak, and I speak Hindi and Tamil. Yes. I can read, write, and speak Hindi and Tamil. So for me, it was very easy to interact with. I could speak Hindi to the Hindi guys, I could speak Tamil to the Tamil guys, and I'm a fairly social guy, so it helped a lot to get to know people and so on. And I think to me, the corridor conversations were actually the key point in our lives, because that's what kept us in contact. And also, I think, as I said, helped us form very long-term friendships. In my own life, everybody faces ups and downs, but my classmates and my wingmates have always been there for me.
Are you in touch with them?
I'm in very, very close contact with them. Even today, I travel quite a bit. I possibly do 100,000 miles a year traveling around and so on. Like Arvind Johari and so on, I was one of the first people to establish contact with them and track him down. I'm saying, what the hell are you doing in Lima, Peru? But we are now good friends, and we talk. And as a matter of fact, I was supposed to visit him last year, so I hope this year I will go to Lima, Peru, and spend a few days with him, just hanging out. He could not come to our reunion, unfortunately, for some personal reasons. So I figured I can go there and see him. Right. As I was saying, we were talking with Mr. Kumar there. What was also surprising for us was how cheap our education was. Yeah. I think my father paid more for my tuition in Bishop Cotton's than what we were. It was 25 rupees a month for the tuition, and 12 rupees 50 paise a month for room rent, and we paid it for only 8 months. So total cost to my father for educating us was 300 rupees a year, plus about 60 to 80 rupees for mess fees.
Now that is an incredible number that you're giving us for...
That was all it was. And as I said, my father used to send my brother 250 rupees a month. He would send me 250 rupees a month and said, you manage on your own. So there was a bank that used to be near the school. I don't know if it's still there. There was a State Bank of India where we all had account. My father had a State Bank of India account, and it was called mail transfer those days. He would automatically, on the first of every month, we would get that, and we would write checks or pay cash. I think initially, before the administration building opened, the civil engineering building had the administrative offices. So that's where we would go and pay the fees. So then of course the library, the administration building, all of them started developing. But when we joined, essentially we had the building sciences block. HSB had just opened, the electrical engineering building was there, and the mechanical engineering. These are the only 3-4 buildings that we attended classes in.
So when you joined, the building sciences block had everything, I understand.
Yes, it was a center of activity. But by the time we came, all our classes were in HSB. Am I pointing in the right direction?
That's right. Yes.
Yeah, the room. I think I'm still trying to remember. It was room 131 and 132. When you enter, there is a corridor like this. When you take a left turn, there is a big room. That's where we had all our classes.
Well, there is this very long corridor. And the chemistry lecture theatre
used to be at the one end. Yeah, chemistry was at one end, physics and mathematics were at this end. But our classroom, if I walked through the main entrance, made at left, and the very first room on the left was the class where we all 100 people sat and had physics and chemistry and mathematics and English. There was also an English professor named Krishnamurthy, who was I think he had come here, he had been the principal of Pachayapas, and he had come here to teach English. And the book that we had at that time, one of the books that we had was Pygmalion, which later became a very famous movie called My Fair Lady. Yes. So he would literally, he was very passionate. The way he would speak with and he could speak very loudly. I mean, he showed so much energy in terms of reading it and understanding it. It was very interesting to watch him. When he taught us, he was possibly already well into his 60s. And here we were 16-year-olds looking at this man and saying, oh my God, he's so passionate about this English class and so on. So that was very nice. I think we had some very good people teaching us. Professor Anantaraman in economics, he used to always come in a bow tie. And we used to kind of quietly joke behind him. His nickname was Butler. And after about 40 years, when we had a reunion, we ran into him, and he came with an open collar shirt. So I asked him, I said, how come you're not wearing your bow tie? He said, I didn't feel like wearing a bow tie. I know you all called me Butler. But that was the nickname for him. But super nice gentleman. I think he gave us a very good grounding in economics. And even today, I remember all the things he taught us.
So was economics a course that you had to
every year we had one or two what are called humanities courses. And I think the idea was that these guys shouldn't be just mechanical, crunching numbers. They need to have a little bit more of humanities. So between German, English literature, economics, and we also had a gentleman named M.S. Vairanapullai, who taught us history. He too, I think, came from, I don't know if it was Pachayapas or one of the city colleges is where he was recruited. And he taught us world history. So we had typically had like 2 courses each year, which was social studies, those kind of classes. Now, Vairanapullai was an older gentleman. His nickname was Vaisanapullai. So we had names for everybody. So these are little anecdotes that you may not find anywhere. Yes. But I hope people take it in the humorous way in which we meant it. And as I said, Professor Anantaraman had no qualms saying, I know you guys call me Butler.
Well, there was a lot of this humor which we have found in student publications, particularly Campus Times, and the annual number that we have a few copies of here. So, who are the big contributors to Campus Times from your batch?
From my batch, there was a guy called Vijayanarayan Reddy who wrote very well. There was a 2-year senior to us, there was a guy named C.V. Sahasranamam. He was quite good at it. There are numerous. There was
also known as Saha.
No, Saha, that is C.V. Sahasra. Yeah. He was 1966 batch. He was pretty good. But Vijay Reddy, then there was a section called Over a Cup of IIT. It was spelt as AYEAYETEA.
That's right. It used to run over several years, I think.
Yeah. And that was, if I'm not mistaken, Saha used to write, Vijayanarayan Reddy used to write. And these especially those of us who came from like senior Cambridge background, and Vijayanarayan Reddy did. I mean, their English was very good. It was a very proper British kind of English. And there were a lot of really, the sense of humor was very much there. Even today, I remember when I took my daughter to meeting of some of my classmates, and he said, "Dad, how come you guys are all so rough on each other?" I said, "That's the way we talk. We call ourselves nicknames, good or bad, and we would come up with nicknames for a lot of people. For example, there was a guy called Pawan Kumar Jain. He used to have a kind of a frowny face. We had a guy named Kili Sridhar, who unfortunately died one day before our convocation in a car accident, or a scooter accident, I should say. And he gave nicknames to every single person. And because this guy had a kind of a frowning face, he used to call him Lord Frowning, like Lord Browning, you know. So there were, I mean, that was the kind of environment that pervaded, and I think in campus times and so on, that's really the essence of what you see.
Yes.
So there are quite a few guys. I think 1 or 2 years junior to us too. There were some. I can't recollect the names off the top of my head, but Saha I remember very well, and Vijayanara and Reddy. These guys wrote over a cup of IIT.
Yes.
And you know, it was a nice pun on the word IIT and IIT.
IIT,
you know? So it was extremely well done.
Yes.
So those were the things, and we used to look forward to the Campus Times magazines. I see one here. If I can take a quick look.
We have selected a couple which we could lay our hands on.
66.
Yes.
Siddhartha was he was a 65 batch.
Yes.
He was a very good debater and very. Gajendra Circle was one. Yeah, I'm trying to see. Ramajam was in our batch, and unfortunately he too met with a motorcycle accident and died.
This was another interesting column that used to be maintained.
Yes,
classified
yes. Divertisements.
Yes.
Oh my God, this brings back memories. I'm trying to. That's the Over a Cup of IIT.
That's right. Yeah.
I don't know who CM is. I'm trying to remember who that was.
Well, here is the Beat X, which I believe you were.
Yes, the BTEX. Yeah, the BTEX were initially. I thought their name was BTEX, like BTECHS, but later they themselves advertised it as BTEX. They would participate in IIT competitions, and the open air theatre, we would have quite a few competitions here. And it was J. Jayaraman from our batch. There was Ashley Solomon, who played the trumpet or clarinet from 69 batch. There was John Ebenezer Tyagarajan Sargunar, Ebi, who played the guitar, and there was a Ranjan Kelly who played also guitar. Jayaraman, of course, was drums. And those were the days of the Shadows and Ventures, where 3 guitars and 1 drummer, Apache and all those kinds of songs. Right. So these guys played. I still remember them playing a jazz number, Take 5 by Dave Brubeck. They were very good. I mean, they were surprisingly good. And I've been in touch with particularly AB and Jayaraman. And about 4 years ago, we had a reunion of all the bands, and they were all here. And it was, I think, September of 2013 or maybe 14. It was magnificent to see guys now well into their 60s, with BTEX and drummers and so on. So that, I think that the entertainment, because a lot of colleges from Madras Christian, SIET, which was a girls' college, Ethiraj, all of them would perform. Madras Christian College. Actually, my Bishop Cotton School classmate was a guy called Ambi Harsha. And he had a group that would come and perform in competition, and he called it, since in Tamil, he called himself Ambi the Kambi and his wires. So that I thought was a very sweet, interesting nickname. I'm still in touch with him. He lives in California and Santa Barbara. But I think, and plus we had hostel days where we had little competitions and singing and music and so on. Of course, at a very minimalist level, because we had very few instruments and it was much more basic. So, I mean, I think these are the kinds of things that kind of improved the relationship and camaraderie that we still have with each other. And I don't know. I remember once talking to Professor Anant, and he said Anant was our contemporary. He was, I think, 67, chemical engineering graduate from AC Tech. He said, if you come now, the people in IIT aren't the same like it was in your time, because there we had no other distraction. There was no TV, nothing else, and we would just, for us, hanging out together or sitting, we had a common room where there were magazines and music player and so on. Those kinds of things were simply non-existent. We could play on the outside. There were guys who played cricket and tennis. Tennis was very unaffordable to most of us at that time. So unless guys who were really good tennis players, and from our batch, we had a guy called V. Srinivasan who was very good. The gentleman Anand Swaminathan from the 66 batch, he was called Horse. He was a very good athlete. He was very good in athletics, and he was a very good tennis player. So this was all the activity that used to go on here. And our contemporary, most of my classmates were classmates with A.G. Satwinder Singh, who was one of the 3 brothers who played cricket, Kripal Singh, Milkha Singh and Satwinder Singh. He represented Guindy, and at the same time Vijayaraghavan, who was a spin bowler, Venkatraghavan, not Vijayaraghavan, Venkatraghavan, cricket test player. Yes. They were all our contemporaries. So they would represent Guindy and come and play cricket here, or these guys would go, and I used to hang out with some other cricket players. So we'd go to Guindy when they would play, and it was a very nice time. It was strange for me to see, because I had grown up in Simla and Delhi, and I was used to talking to Sardarjis who typically spoke Hindi and Punjabi. To see Satwinder Singh speak fluent Tamil just made me laugh. I mean, he spoke fluent Tamil, and here is a guy with a turban speaking Tamil, where a few years ago I was in Simla thinking, how the hell can this guy even speak Tamil? So
this emphasis on, or rather the amount of extracurricular activities that seem to be in the fact of life in IIT at that time is truly impressive, because it reminds you of the British kind of schooling of certain.
Yes.
Plus there was this emphasis on entertainment and literary pursuits. So it was a all-round kind of rounded life that you were.
But I think it was a reflection of the backgrounds that we came from. Again, I go back to the fact that none of us, even I came from an upper middle class family, but there was no TVs, so we basically went out on the street and played, or, we played in our school teams and stuff like that. So there was, most of our activity was confined to academics or sporting type activities or social type activities. There was really not much else anybody.
So you lived life to the full in each of these.
That's right. One of the things, I have a 25-year-old daughter, and I always, today kids, the first thing they want to do is pick up the cell phone and start staring at it. For us, there was no question of staring at it. So we looked outside and said, hey, is it raining? If not, we'll go play. And also within the, there were very typically, those of us who went to English kind of schools played cricket, hockey and football and so on. But the people who came from smaller towns in Tamil Nadu, for example, I had not been exposed, having grown up mostly in the north. There was something called ball badminton, which instead of using a shuttlecock, you used a little ball. Right. And then there was tennis-quoit, which was a ring. These are things, rubber ring. Then there were guys who were interested in things like kabaddi or kho-kho. These were very simple games where you didn't need a lot of equipment that anybody could afford. For example, tennis. Very few guys could afford to go to a tennis club, and tennis balls, if I remember right, at a time when our monthly, just let me put it in perspective, at a time when our fees was only 37.50, tennis ball was 40 rupees. That is what, so it was very, very elite group of.
It was a serious thing to hit a ball out.
That's right. Yes. So what it said was Anand Swaminathan and all came from fairly, very well-off families. The guy that's I think it's the same guy, the guy who's the India Cements, N. Srinivasan, if I remember right, he played tennis for AC Tech. He was 1 or 2 years senior to us, and he would represent AC Tech in tennis and play against Srinivasan, and there was a guy called Lionel Paul who was very well ranked here. Yes. And so Lionel Paul represented IIT. So these were the guys that could play because they were fathers or members of clubs and things of that kind. I'm actually through one of my uncles connected to Ramanathan Krishnan's family. So Ramanathan Krishnan has brought me here a couple of times. We would meet at some house and he'd say, I'd give you a ride to IIT Madras, and he would ask me, how's Lionel Paul doing? And
he was a Wimbledon player.
He was a Wimbledon player, and he was distantly connected to us. So.
And his son too.
His son too, that's right, yeah. Right. But of course, in 1959-60 and all, he made it to the semi-finals of Wimbledon. He was a really big shot. But to just give you an idea of how expensive tennis was, so we got to learn, because we had tennis-quoit and ball badminton courts right in the quadrangle within the hostel. Yes. So you didn't even have to go anywhere. You could play right then and there. We had a lot of table tennis activity. We had, I think, he graduated in our batch, a guy called Subbarao, who was ranked like number 4 or something in India. He was a superb table tennis player. So those were the main activities we had. There was not a lot of other activity. Some of the things that I do think has changed, for example, I see all these ads for the Shastra, those kinds of things we didn't have the opportunity to do. I think any misgiving I had is a lot of our creative talents, there was not a lot of resources to do those kinds of things. Develop robots or try to build little things. The only thing that some people did was to build a small transistor radio. Yeah. That was very common for people to build transistor radios in those days.
And the most satisfying
at least you created a product. So that, yeah.
It should provide you entertainment.
Yeah. The other thing I mean, some of the memories is when my father and all wanted to reach me, there used to be one phone in the corner room of our hostel. So they would call that number, and then one guy would come running and say, "Unga appa amma ungala koopra." You know,
It was a coin operated machine, possibly.
No, it was not. It was a regular phone that some guy was sitting. He would answer, and they would say, "Can we talk to Narayanswami in room 351?" So he would come chasing after us to find us. And if he didn't find us, there was, you know, you couldn't make a call. So mostly it was incoming calls. We really didn't have the ability to make phone calls out, because I don't know who got charged what or whatever. But we used to get calls from there. So today I'm sure everybody has multiple cell phones and connectivity is improved so much. But for us, especially those of us whose parents, my father initially was in Bangalore for my first 2 years. Then he got transferred to Pune. Yes. And you know, for him, and from there to come, it was not easy. And so they used to try and keep in touch by phone maybe once a week or so on. And if you're not in your room, all he could say was, he's not there, try again.
Well, that was the time of trunk calls.
Trunk calls, that's right.
So you needed to book a call and wait for an hour or so.
Yeah, for calls to come through. And many times when the call came, we were not in our rooms. See, all this guy could do was, Narayanswami in room 351, yes. He would either yell, or the poor guy would come upstairs, knock on the door and say, "There's a appa amma kupranga very you know, it was a different era. So. Right. But in some ways, I said it taught us to be very independent, self-reliant. Yes. You know, at age 16, I was managing my life. You know, I mean, even today when I think about it, I say, "My God, how did I do it?" There was my mother cooking and looking after me, and now I have nobody to do all that for me.
I would like to ask you about what is today Sarang, and had its origins in the time of when you and your brother were here. I understand, was it in 62 or was it in 63 that the first literary and cultural week was held in IIT Madras? I understand that has transformed into Mardi Gras later on, and subsequently.
You know, to be honest with you, I don't think it was done that much, even the literary kind of festival. It was at a very low key level, because I don't recollect. The one thing I do recollect was that when I was in my second year, the inter-IIT meet was a big deal, and Nawab Pataudi came here to inaugurate it. So that was a huge event, and I was one of the volunteers.
He was a cricket captain.
He had just become the cricket captain, and also I think he was either going out with Sharmila Tagore, or the relationship was just starting. I remember there were a group of us who volunteered, and it was nice to have guys from IIT Bombay, and so that was a big event. But the literary event, as you, I don't recollect much of it, because I don't think it was as big at that time. But we did have frequent quiz shows and other colleges from Madras coming and participating. Particularly, the open air theatre was a big plus for us. It gave a lot of other colleges possibly didn't have the same facility. So we spent an awful amount of time in OIT either watching movies or watching cultural shows or dances. And I think one of the best things that IIT Madras did was to have the open air theatre. I think it gave an impetus for us to try different things and so on. And of course, there were a couple of years where we saw movies like every second or third day somebody was showing a movie. So it was a lot of fun. And I think I managed to see quite a few pictures from the 40s and 50s at the open air theatre. So
these were mostly English movies.
It was English. Every now and then we would get either a Tamil or a Telugu movie, but I would say 90% of the pictures were English. And they were, initially it was shown I think in 8mm, then we got a 16mm projector, and we had a much bigger screen and so on. The quality was possibly not the greatest, but it was still a lot of fun for us to watch the movies. It used to be on, as he was pointing out, it used to be on Saturday nights, then it moved to Sunday nights, then every now and then on a Wednesday night or so we would have a movie. Then part of the thing that affected us was this, not to change the topic, but one of the surprising things for us was this, when we joined, was the surprise tests. We were not used to having surprise tests. So we were the batch that a lot of experimentation was tried on. So then when I think people said that the surprise test is, people are not prepared for it, they really are not ready for it. We went to a system where on a Friday night, they would post the 3 exams that would be held on Saturday. So you literally had from about 5 p.m. to the next morning 7 a.m. if you chose not to sleep, to really prepare for the exam. So, but that became very stressful. Then it was changed to Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So the movie schedule had to be adjusted. So on days that we had periodicals, we could not show or the day before the periodical, movies would not be shown. So we went through all this evolution of finding the right days and so on. There was a lot of those of us who didn't have that many relatives there. Even though I'm a Tamilian, I did not have, I had a few relatives, but nobody whose house I went to regularly. So for us, seeing movies on Saturdays was very convenient, because you didn't have nothing else to do on a Saturday night. But all the local guys would catch the 110 bus on a Saturday afternoon, go to their home and come back by 7 o'clock the next day. So they all wanted to see the movie on a Sunday. So we went through multiple iterations of when movies can be shown and so on. So this is all evolved.
So now it's a well-evolved system.
Well-evolved system. Along the same line, as you were talking about periodicals, I have to share one of the funnier stories of tests. And we, in the second year, we had what was called civil engineering drawing. And civil engineering drawing was a very monotonous thing. You drew bricks and how the front of an inspection bungalow looks and so on. So it was very extremely, there was no design or anything. You're essentially, looking at a book and making these drawings and so on. Some guy figured out, one of our classmates, and it was in our batch that it happened, he figured out that, hey, these guys, after they correct it, they write your grade in pencil, you can quietly erase it, change the roll number and resubmit the same drawing under It came to a point where for 200 of us, there were only 15 drawings. It was being resubmitted over and over again. And the funny part of the story was the same drawing got everything from a C to an A. One guy would give it a C, another teacher would give it an A. Finally, there was one of the guys, when you had to make sure you erase the grade, you had to make sure you erase the name, and you had to make sure you erase the roll number and put your roll number in. One guy, he forgot to change the roll number, and when it went back to the teacher, he said, wait a second, I think I saw this drawing just a few minutes ago. And he caught us. Oh my God, all hell broke loose. We were brought in front of the department. They said, none of all your drawings are useless. So we were made to, after our final exams were over, they wrote a letter to our parents. After the final exam was over, we were forced to stay back 1 week, and we sat and did every drawing from start to finish. I don't know if that backfired on us. Also, that triggered a change. Not only did they, after they gave it a grade, and they marked the grade in the register, they took a hole punch and punched a hole in the drawing so that it could never be resubmitted again. So our batch became famous for cheating because we discovered a simple method of avoiding. It was very monotonous drawing, so I think there was something to be said. But it was so the batches after us paid a heavy price because now they could not get away with the The other thing we did was what was called glass plating, which is you would take a drawing, put it on a glass plate and shine a light from underneath. So it would show through very well, and you simply took a blank sheet of paper, and there were some very hard-working guys. You got a hold of one of them, got their drawing, and what took him 3 hours to do, you did it in 15 minutes.
It's a tracing effort.
Tracing effort. So these are some of the funny events of being school kids and college kids and so on, and trying. But again, as I said, all these kind of brought us together. The civil engineering thing, though, was a fiasco. Our parents were very upset because they said, how can you do this, blah, blah, blah.
Yes, of course. Right. There was a restaurant on campus called Knick Knack.
Knick Knack. Their cutlets were very good.
What was it? Where was it located? And
it was somewhere near where the workshops used to be. And actually the food was quite good. And because I'd grown up in the north, I liked cutlets and those kinds of things, and they were very good. So it was nice to go periodically and have some cutlets and so on. Actually, I think it vanished after that. The entire food culture, I think, changed, because the other thing was, I remember since my brother was in Kaveri, the cook in Kaveri was a very good dosa maker. So I would quietly come on Sundays and eat dosa with my brother because their dosas were very good. The guy in Narmada was terrible. I mean, rather in Tapti was terrible. He didn't make very good dosas. So there are little things like this that we used to be able to do. But Knick Knack was extreme. I don't know. I think at least the 5 years that I was here, it was there. I don't know what happened to it afterwards and whether as other avenues developed, whether it just died or, but they used to make phenomenal cutlets. I remember that very well. The only other outlet that we had, particularly for non-vegetarians, was the Hotel Runs, which is still there.
Yes.
That was there, and a lot of these people who ate non-vegetarian used to go to Runs. There was a Hotel Coronet, which is at that corner of LB Road. That was there. There was Adayar Bakery, where you could buy some stuff. Otherwise, most of us went to Drive-In Woodlands, which was very active at that time. There used to be, in Mylapore, there was a restaurant called Shanti Vihar, which is where Venkatragon used to hang out. So, because he was from that area, and their food was very good. So many times we would go to either Drive-In Woodlands or Shanti Vihar when we wanted to eat something outside. Yeah. So that was the kind. And sometimes you could bike it. Otherwise, we would go outside and catch 21C or 5B. 5B I think ran from Mylapore to T Nagar. Yeah. So you could catch that bus. So we would take the campus bus out to the gate and then stand there at the gate to catch the buses.
Well, in those days, I suppose the traffic was so much less.
Much less.
I mean, you didn't think much about cycling up there, but
yeah,
today you would.
Today we couldn't.
You wouldn't think about it.
I had an uncle of mine who was a gentleman who was connected with Ramnath and Krishnan. He had some medical issues, so once a year he would drive his ambassador up here and visit all the people and get some medical checkup. When he came here, he would let me drive the car. So I remember even though I was only 16, 17, I have driven the car all over. Mount Road and all used to be empty. It was so easy to drive to these places. Today, for about 5 years, I maintained an apartment here from 2010 to 2015. I had an apartment in Thiruvanmiyur. I actually bought a Hyundai Santro. My God, I found it so difficult to drive because of traffic, motorcycles cutting me from the left and cutting me from the right. Driving in 1964 and all, a big ambassador to the piece of cake. There was nobody else on the road. All that has changed dramatically. So it was very convenient for us to use public transport. We go out. Most of the buses weren't that crowded. Or we'd go to the Adayar bus stand and have access to a few more buses. Our IIT bus used to go all the way to Adayar bus stand. So,
well, this despite the fact that Adayar was the southernmost part of the city almost at that time, except for the Tambram line, which is a different story.
Well, you could also, a lot of people used to take the bike. I remember going to the airport to meet some relatives. You would go to Gindi station or something and catch the train suburban train to Meenambakam airport and then walk across and so on. So, I mean, I would suspect that when we joined IIT, India's population may have been about 450 million, which is roughly 1/3 of what it is now. Yes. So the infrastructure was a lot less strained than what we see. I don't recollect this amount of garbage piling up everywhere for the simple reason there were very few packaged goods. You couldn't buy potato chips in a packet, or everything was, you would buy it, if you bought the stuff, he would wrap it in an old newspaper or something of that kind, which could the guy would come and pick up old newspapers. Yeah, so I think the garbage problem was a lot less severe. We definitely had the first few guys that had motorcycles here used to hit deer all the time here. We had quite a few accidents of motorcyclists hitting deer. And one of the guys ended up killing Sengupta's dog. And he then built a little grave for the dog and so on. So those are the problems within the campus. There were a lot of accidents with deer. But the deer population seems to have survived. It's still I see deer all over the place.
Did you have any other animals coming into the hostels and so on? Like, obviously, people are very worried about snakes coming in. And
I don't recollect snakes. The one thing that I do recollect is there would be these frogs that would sit behind the cistern. And I hate frogs, and it would be one of the biggest things we wanted to avoid. You brought up a very interesting thing that I forgot to mention. We dreaded being on the ground floor, because the bathrooms would always, first variety of people would be using the bathroom, they would generally be much messier. Secondly, especially on the ground floor, you would go there and you would see this big frog sitting behind the cistern. Yes. 2 years of my 5 years, I ended up being on the ground floor and hated every minute of it. The ideal was the middle floor, because you had to climb only one flight of stairs. Yes. But the top floor was also, the breeze was much better, so you could sleep very well at night. So the top floor, but this ground floor is nothing but hell.
It was a noisy floor
with noisy floor, and plus everybody who went to the mess would walk right across, or would go to the other side to spend time in the common room and so on. So that was so it was not, but the ground floor was not the preferred. We remember seeing a movie where the one guy was given, because his tent was very close to the latrine, they were called private latrine orderly, PLO. So the last room in all our hostels were called the PLO room. That came from a movie.
So what about the senior faculty members and administrators? Specifically we think about Professor Sengupta and Mr. Natarajan in terms of the period in which you studied here. Did you get chances to interact with them? What were they like?
Not as much with Professor Sengupta, because by the time we joined, there were 5 years of students. There were a lot more students. I think my brother's batch obviously got a lot more communication with Sengupta. But Professor Natarajan, he used to conduct quiz shows and so on. He was a much more a people-oriented person. So a lot of us have talked to him, and he would have access. And as I said, I had relatives who were in the IAS and knew him, and so we had all kinds of connections. But I think he was the best thing that could have happened to IIT as a registrar, because I think he bridged a lot of the people like Sengupta could be difficult personalities, but because of his personality, I think he bridged a lot of gaps and kind of was very much the people skilled person here. The students loved him, the German faculty loved him, everybody loved him. It was a big change when we went from him to C.V. Sethanathan. He was definitely not that kind of a personality. So we all could detect the change, and he'd be a little bit more harsh with us, and he would threaten that I'm going to send a letter to your father and do. But Natarajan never did any of those kinds of things. I think he handled the issues as they came up. So just a culturally different kind of an environment. So during our final year, Professor A. Ramachandran became the director, and he actually, because he was a mechanical engineering by training, one of the nice things he did was he took a mechanical engineering course for us. Not only was he the director, he actually taught a course, and that kind of brought him down to earth. We didn't think of him as, oh, the director, he's sitting up there. He is actually a professor, and he can talk the language that we are talking vis-a-vis the subjects that we were taking, or something of that kind. So he was also, I think, while Sengupta had a very good reputation for having started this whole thing, I think Ramachandran brought a sense of reality to being the director, and much more accessible, much more open. And he also came from a very illustrious family. So I think that was a big plus for us.
For a while, his father was the chairman.
Lakshmaswamy Mudaliar.
He was the director.
So, but he was extremely nice personality. It was easier to talk to and so on. So by the time we came, some of the bonds because now it was a bigger operation. There were 200 people in my batch, 200 people. There were like 700, 800 students by the time we joined. Whereas when my brother joined first batch, there were 100 students. And when the second batch joined, only another 100 joined. So there were only 200 people, and everybody knew everybody else and so on.
They've said that it was like a family.
It was a family. It was a very small family. Yeah. So to that. And classes, particularly in each branch with 100 people, my brother's batch, LC, possibly had only 10 people in the class. HC had another 10 people and so on. By the time we came, mechanical engineering had 60 people, civil engineering had 30 people. So the classroom, then you start losing a little bit of that personal touch, where it was a little bit more of a formal education process. But I think up till our batch and maybe 1 or 2 batches, the camaraderie was still there. Then as more hostels started mushrooming and the classes got bigger, I think I have no idea how it is now. I think now the first year they take like 800 people, right? Is that, I don't know.
The numbers have gone up yes.
Basically, yeah.
They went up recently. I think there was a 4-fold increase. Okay. So that it's quite possible.
Somebody told me that about 800 undergraduate is like 800 people, and now there are 26 IITs and so on. So yes. I don't know what the dynamics of all is. One of the pluses is I feel very good when I tell somebody that I'm an IIT graduate. It's amazing the aura that it still has. So I feel very good about it.
That's one thing that has been constant right from the beginning.
Right from the beginning, IIT definitely had developed a very good reputation. And of course, these days, of course, with people like Sundar Pichai and all having very prominent jobs, all of a sudden, almost everybody in the world says, "Oh, you went to IIT." It is definitely it's become a solid currency in terms of recognition. So that's been a very big plus. So I think we were all lucky to have experienced this. I would definitely say from a personal point of view, I've traveled the world, I've been in various jobs. I think the IIT education has come through loud and strong. And more than that, I think people skills. I worked for Johnson & Johnson for about 20 years in a fairly senior position. I remember whenever we looked at future candidates, one of the first questions everybody would ask is, I know he knows the technology, how good are his people skills? So they always ranked people skills as a very critical area. And I think having lived in this kind of an environment, camaraderie and closeness environment, I think we all developed some very, very good personal skills. How much that exists now, I need to find out. Next time I'm here, I'm going to spend a few days with some of the younger kids and see, how is it, how do you interact with each other? Do you guys keep in touch with each other once you leave college and so on? Because our batches, we keep in touch very well. And of course, the internet and Facebook and all have helped tremendously. Yes. But even before that, we had, particularly in the US, we had phone numbers. One way or the other, we managed to get each other's phone number. And when we traveled, I lived in Huntington Beach in Southern California, not very far from Disneyland. So I'd always get visitors and they would come and stay with me. They say, hey, Nacha, where are you staying? Can I come and spend a few days with you? I want to bring my little kids over. So I was kind of the home for Disneyland visitors. Yes. And invariably the visitors were from my IIT classmates, right. 1 year junior or 1 year senior and so on. So like this guy Sethuraman, who I used to know very well here, that's Sesvi Sekhar's brother-in-law, he would come and spend, bring his 2 daughters and spend time. We could go to the beach and go to Disneyland and Knott's Berry Farm and so on. So we maintained our friendships extremely well. But these are friendships where the root cause was IIT. Because of that only we can't know each other.
Yes. So. Yes. Can you tell us about your the postgraduate year that you spent here?
It was interesting. The good news was we were paid a 250 rupees stipend. So my father no longer had to send me money. So all postgraduate people got 250 rupees. We were the second batch of postgraduate diploma in industrial engineering. And I don't think the faculty was, that was not a pleasant year from an education point of view. I mean, the people were nice, the IIT environment.
You go to a different hostel, did you?
Yeah, I stayed in, we were in Kaveri. We were all put up in Kaveri. Our batch had to change hostels every year. The first year we were allowed to stay in the same hostel to minimize ragging and so on, but after that we were mixed and matched. And that was, I think that was a good idea because we got to meet some of the people from other batches and so on. Now when I did my PGDIE, basically all of us were on 2 floors of one wing. There were only 20 of us in the class. Yes. But I think because it was just the second year, it really was not organized well. And if you ask me, did I get much out of that 1 year? My answer would be no. Really didn't learn much, nothing new. I think my 5 years at IIT, the hardcore engineering, definitely left a much stronger impression. The 1 year program didn't leave much of an impression for me. But I think now with MTech and MBA and all kinds of, I'm sure the faculties are much more developed. But I think our problem was there was really no faculty. People are like Professor Ramani and all, he had just finished his IIM Calcutta and right away he was teaching us. So there was not much of practical experience he brought or anything of that kind. So it was more of an academic pursuit.
Right. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Narayanswami.
Oh, it was very nice talking. It kind of brings back a lot of memories. I will try and get you, somewhere I have my original copy. I will donate it to you.
Thank you so much. Yes. Yes.
Thank you.